Welcome back, everyone. My name is Steven Rodriguez. I'm your true champion, and we are live here on YouTube. I know it seems like a YouTube video to you, but really, it's a live stream. And not only do I go live on YouTube sometimes, I also go live on Twitch sometimes. Link down below to that. And if you're interested in seeing any live streams or videos from me in the future, be sure to like and subscribe and click that bell for notifications so you don't miss out. Now, today we're doing something really special because last time I checked, tier maker is still a thing, even though we're in 2022. And on top of that, the Digimon TCG is still a thing. So, using all of our mental IQ points and the tools available to us, we are going to make a tier list of all of the best and most played decks in the Digimon TCG as of right now in the current English format. That means BT6 and starter decks 7 and 8. No EX01 cards will be talked about today, even though there are a lot of really cool ones that may or may not impact the meta in the future. If they do, I'll be sure to let you know. Now, a really cool thing about the BT6 format that hopefully I'll be able to convey to you today during this tier list is how awesome it is. Not because the decks that are doing really well are really cool, but also because the way people are choosing to innovate and combat the ever-growing and challenging metagame is impressive. There's tons of really fun and interesting decks that are actually really good. But on the flip side, like anything, for anything equally as good, there's a lot of equally bad. There's a lot of trash decks to talk about that no one should be playing, but people still do, and I'll be sure to tear them a new one like I always do. With that said, if you guys have any thoughts for yourselves or want to do this tier list for yourself and let me know your responses on Twitter or wherever else, I'll leave a link down below to the template so you can check it out if you want to. But with that being said, let's hop over to the tier list and rip apart all these decks. All right, here we are at the tier list. It's very beautiful. I went with circles this time instead of squares. I figured it'd look really nice. Now, I want to just quickly go over the tiers and what they mean. Pretty self-explanatory. We have tier 1. Those are the best decks, the most played decks. The two main factors I look at when it comes to judging if a deck should be considered tier 1 is how popular it is, meaning how often is it going to be played, or how powerful it is. Basically, what is it capable of doing, and is that what it's capable of doing good in the current format? The second tier is tier 1.5 or fringe decks. These decks are fringe. They're basically tier 1, but because of some factor like a bad matchup or popularity, or it's not quite as powerful as it should be, it's not quite tier 1, but if you know the deck well and get lucky enough with your matchups, you can take down entire events, no problem. Moving away from tier 1.5, we have tier 2. Now, normally in tier lists of yesteryear, I've had both tier 2 and tier 3, but in this list, I've decided to change tier 2 and tier 3 to tier 2 and rogue. And the reason is because I feel like tier 3 is no longer a useful tier in Digimon because there are just so many decks now that most of them are never played, and it's just like I'm just gonna be throwing things like Rust Tyrannomon, old school Hercules Kabuterimon into tier 3 and no one's gonna care. But tier 2 decks are decks that people are still playing that they probably shouldn't, whether that's because the support just isn't there yet, or the matchups are terrible in the current metagame, or they're just bad decks and no one wants to admit it. But rogue decks are a different story. So they're not tier 3, they're not tier 1, they're not tier 1.5. These decks I would like to call the surprise decks. The decks that people just don't really consider, even though new support is there for them, or they've just gotten naturally better as time went on. A good example of a deck that could have been considered rogue back in the day was D-Brigade. You know, in set 4, it was literally a laugh out loud, why are you playing that deck meme. But nowadays, it's respected, it's good, it's adapting as new cards come out, and it's pretty good given the current metagame. So that's what rogue is going to be. It's a very personal category. I'm going to be making a lot of judgments on decks for what I think they are, but your rogue list might look different from mine. So be sure to let me know, again, guys, what your list of set 6 looks like. Down below is the template. Give it a shot for yourself. But that being said, first deck we're going to talk about is Three Musketeers, the Queen Bielstramon herself. And honestly, we're starting off pretty strong. A lot of you know that at the beginning of set 6, for a long time, I was not, and I mean not, a big fan of Three Musketeers. But a lot of people disagree with me. This deck is definitely one of the most popular, even though another deck that's very similar to it I think is better. This deck is more popular. You know, when it comes to like a slower, or should I say like a more set up, advantage oriented archetype, Three Musketeers is like the most preferred. And when it comes to purple decks, Three Musketeers is the most preferred, and it's also really good. Like Bielstormon over and over and over again on top of like Omnimon Zwarts and multiple nail bones can get very scary in the late game. And that's why, to me, Bielstormon is a very easy tier 1. No question, deck's insane. It's got a Bay as its boss monster. What more can you ask for? Moving up next, we actually have our first entry into the Rogue category, in my opinion, and that is Craniamon Black Blockers. Originally, for the black color, people were just so excited to finally have good cards in black, like Genkumon and Iron Fist Onslaught or Alphamon. They're like, hey, let's just build a toolbox deck that uses all these good cards. But, as you guys recently saw from my most recent deck profile, I'm a huge fan of Craniamon Black, and that's because the format has like been diverged into 2 sections. You have like all the really defensive / control-y decks like Three Musketeers, and you have all the OTK / aggro focused decks. And having a sticky black blocker deck that can like naturally play around those things is, I think, really cool and a surprise for a lot of people that aren't prepared for it. So I think Rogue is an awesome fit for Craniamon, no questions asked. Ooh, speaking of decks that I know people love, we have Bond of Bravery. Should be Bond of Courage, but whatever. Bond of Bravery. And to me, this is tier 1.5, no question. It may seem like an easy tier 1 because it's good against other Bond decks. It's good against Eos Mondex. Heck, it is the best Bond deck naturally for playing against security control. So why on earth, Steven, is it tier 1.5? Well, random citizen, the honest truth is, for me to put this at tier 1, I would need to say that in order for you to do well at a tournament, you need to be able to beat Bond of Courage. And that's just not true. Like, every person you talk about, when they talk about like, what decks are you worried about in set 6, no one says Bond of Courage. They go, how am I gonna beat Bond of Courage? Oh my God, it's so oppressive, it's so stupid, it's so scary. No, like literally, no one plays Bond of Bravery, even though we know it's strong. It's weird. Like, we all know it's a good deck, but no one plays it, and I don't know why. I do think it's good against security control. I don't think it's that good against Three Musketeers, and I don't think it's that good against Bond of Friendship. It's really just the 50-50 at the end of the day. So, you know, it is good on paper, but people aren't willing to put it into practice. So I think tier 1.5 is a fair category, especially given what the meta is currently looking like. Now, backtracking a little bit to what I said earlier, like people thought that Darkdramon or D-Brigade was like a meme deck, right? Well, D-Brigade's kind of like changed its tune. It's become actually a very consistent deck. It's really good at keeping dudes on board and like keeping up aggression. And I find that while it may not be like super obvious to you how to build a D-Brigade deck, or it might not be the most consistent thing in the world, ever since we got the Starter Deck 7 and Starter Deck 8, it's had a ton of tools to it that I think at least gives it a rogue category. You have that aggression that lets you beat up Jesmon / Bond of Friendship decks that are too slow to set up. You have the ability to constantly get dudes swarming on board / recur cards in your deck against security control that I feel like it has a lot of good matchups, and it just has a lot of really interesting ways to pressure people out of nowhere, especially if you're not ready for it. So it seems like a pretty easy rogue inclusion to me. All right, Eosmon. This very special deck, special to me, special to you, special to everyone that's ever been blessed by the power that is Eos Mondex. You would know, if you're a fan of anything I've done in the past, that I'm not a fan of this deck, and I'm still not. Whether it's yellow, green, black, blue, doesn't matter. I don't think there's that much this deck can do as of right now, and as you can tell by the image I'm using here, I'm going to come up with a very special tier just for Eosmon. There, that's the tier that Eosmon will stay in. No need for further questions. I'm the worst. Okay, sorry. Now that we've got the trash deck out of the way, let's talk about a deck that I'm in love with. Arguably my favorite deck in the BT6 format, and that is Gabumon Bond of Friendship. Unlike Bond of Bravery or Bond of Courage, this is an easy tier 1. Easy tier 1. like early, like first 3 weeks dominance alone still gives it tier 1 because of how popular it is after the fact. But all the newer pure versions that are coming out, like the ones that include Corgimon, the ones that include Red Tai, Kamiya, Delicate Plan, and Lightning Joust to combat security control decks, they are all amazing strategies and showcases how adaptive this kind of deck can be and how consistent it still is. So I'm a huge fan of pure Rookie Rush kind of Bond of Friendship. Now, unlike pure Bond of Friendship, Ancient Garurumon Bond of Friendship is tier 2. And that's because it sucks. It's literally, guys, literally, if you're a fan of Ancient Garurumon Bond of Friendship, I respect you, I love you, but let me tell you something right now, it is just a worse version of Bond of Friendship. That potential extra attack you get is all well and good, but you still lose to all the same things that Bond of Friendship does, but you make it less likely for you to actually get off a Bond of Friendship turn, which is way stronger in every sense of the word than just a regular Ancient Garurumon turn. So it's tier 2 because it just makes a good deck worse, and that makes no sense to me. So please, if you're playing Ancient Garuru Bond of Friendship, just take out those useless Lobos and those useless Ancient Garurus and play some Red Tamers and some Lightning Jousts. You will not regret it. After that, we have 2 more decks that I want to talk about, Green OTK and Green Control. Now, Green Control is like Ancient Troymon, Nidhoggmon type stuff, and it's the actual support that Green got from the 6th set in like a pure sense. The other one was, you know, garbage. And while this deck is really cool, it has a nice natural counter to like the really aggro Rookie Rush decks like D-Brigade or Bond of Friendship or Bond of Bravery. I just don't think it has a very viable win condition that lets it get the most consistent wins, and people just don't really play it. So I'm going to give it like a tier 2 sort of placement for the overall meta. But Green OTK, on the other hand, is actually really interesting, and Tyler Sir from Gaia Force Gaming actually piloted Green OTK to a Set 6 regional and did really well. And I think it's because the deck kind of like naturally matches up with the other decks of the format, and you have a natural way to combat the really aggro decks that might be a bit more aggressive than you in the form of being able to play Ancient Troymon and Nidhoggmon. So you're like an aggro deck or an OTK deck, but you have way more removal options that are naturally aggressive as well. So I actually think it's a really cool rogue deck. I don't think it's the best against security control. That matchup seems like a coin flip. But if you know that matchup really well, it might be better for you, and they might not have tested against your deck, so you can probably like catch them by surprise. So I do like it. I think it belongs in the rogue category moving forward. Now that we've gotten some riff-raff out of the way, now that we've gotten in the vibe of judging some decks, let's talk about a deck that everyone loves to hate right now, and that is Jessamon. Honestly, guys, this deck is tier 1, obviously, because everyone plays it, and it has some of the most guaranteed wins I've ever seen when it comes to like an OTK type deck. Like, if you get that god tier combo of Tai Kamiya, Greymon, Delicate Plan, there's the handshake, good match, I'll see you later. I don't care what you're playing against, it's over. But what's really funny, and I like about Jessamon, is it's so good, and people hate playing against it so much that it's actually given evolution or rise to more innovative deck building, because people don't want to play Jessamon, and they don't want to play the stuff that naturally beats Jessamon, so they're gonna like run all this crazy weird stuff that can beat it instead. Like, for example, playing Sakuyamon in any yellow deck, which I'll talk about in a second and why that's really cool. So while Jessamon is the current deck to beat in Set 6, people are doing a good job of figuring out how to beat it. So I'm wondering how long it'll stay the king of the hill moving forward. These 2 decks are kind of the same, but I'll talk about them separately, and that is Lilithmon Loop, and then the other one is Titamon Loop. And in my opinion, Titamon is only slightly better and more consistent at being aggressive and getting W's than Lilith, but both of them have gotten a lot out of BT6 and are still very relevant. I would actually say that Lilithmon's probably the top of tier 2, And the only reason why is because people are just preferring to play things like Digimon and Three Musketeers. So like whenever you see a Lilithmon deck, there's only like 1 or 2 of it max at any given event. But it might still do well if you know what you're doing with Lilithmon. And then Digimon, we all know how stupid the Ginkumon promote stuff can be with this type of deck. It can lead to really powerful Zwart loop combos, or it can be powerful all by itself and attacking for plus security and getting you lots of board. It definitely feels like a very advantage-oriented purple deck that also has a ton of burst potential when needed, and that kind of deck is really appealing, especially when you're like a by the books, like I just want to figure out how to beat people through technical play type player. Moving away from the purple decks, I actually wanted to like dedicate this entire section talking about all the yellow decks that exist in set 6, because at the end of set 5, everyone and their mom was tired of playing against yellow, and so we all naturally thought that once we got these new powerhouses in Bond of Bravery, Jesmon, Bond of Friendship, Three Musketeers, that we'd never see yellow again. But I'm very pleased to tell you that we are still seeing a ton of yellow representation in tournaments, because again, BT6, the message isn't, hey, broken decks get even more broken, it's, hey, broken decks can be beaten by the strangest of things. And decks that we thought were the king a second ago can still be really good, even though they've been power crept out of the format. A great example is very recently, Dan Vang won first place undefeated at a European Regional with Lord Nightmon. And tons of people are finding new ways to utilize all the powerful security effect cards from set 6 in their Yellow War Greymon / Mastemon decks. In fact, I built one earlier today. And moreover, and much to my happiness, set 6 gave us a new yellow tamer. And whenever you see a new yellow tamer, people find a way to bring back Shine Greymon. So let's talk about all 3 of these. In my opinion, yellow is still the best color if your goal is to grind advantage with your opponent, because not only do you have the ability to multi-attack or gain board, you have the ability to control your opponent's board at the exact same time. You have ways to get guaranteed extra damage like Mastemon or Bushy Agumon, and you have ways to play around anything your opponent can do by just having access to a crazy diverse and powerful card pool. And when it comes to like judging how strong or how weak these decks are, in terms of popularity, I think War Greymon / Maste variants are the most popular. Lord Nightmon is creeping up ever since Dan did really well with the deck and people realize just how good it is. A lot of people tend to think that Lord Nightmon is just worse Jesmon, but that's not the case. Jesmon's an OTK deck. Lord Nightmon is an advantage / tempo deck. They play very differently, and the real big difference, in my opinion, is Lord Nightmon wants to attack to gain advantage, while Jesmon wants to attack to win the game. It's a very, very fine, like minute difference, but it makes a world of difference when you actually play with these 2 decks in a match. And then there's Shine Greymon, and because of Shine Greymon's blisterly awful security control matchup, I can't give it anything higher than tier 2, but it is much better than it was like 2 or 3 formats ago, and I do like where it could be going in the near future with set 7. So while it may not be super crazy right now, it did get better, and it is really neat against things like Jesmon. So yeah, that's all I have to say about the yellow decks of the set 6 format. I think their biggest plus is how diverse their card pool is, from defensive cards like Sakuyamon and Recovery to aggressive cards like Bushy Agumon and Mastemon. Now that I've left my soapbox of how amazing yellow is, let's talk about another deck that I love, which is Black Royal Knights, probably the most popular black deck as of right now. And as I said earlier, it was born out of the fact that black has gotten the best support cards ever in BT6, generically speaking. Genkumon, Alphamon, Iron Fist Onslaught, and the list goes on. There's just so many good cards in black now that building a toolbox deck like this is a no-brainer. It's very adaptive. It feels like the 50-50 deck of the format, and when you put a deck like that in the hands of a really good player, you're gonna see some success. And so I think it's only proper to give it a tier 1.5 placing. It's not the best deck, but you can definitely win with it no matter what you play against. And I think that's a really awesome thing, especially given how questionable metagames can be sometimes as to what you should or should not play. And as always, before I talk about the most toxic deck of Digimon, let's talk about a really cool deck, and that is Ulforce Veedramon. Now, if you guys don't know, this Ulforce is the one that is the DC1 Grand Prix promo, and it's referring to the set 1.5 Ulforce Veedramon. And the reason why I bring that up is because, to me, Ulforce Veedramon 1.5 is the deck that got the most support from Starter Deck 7, or sorry, Starter Deck 8 being printed. There's a ton of awesome Arrow Veedramon, Vmon cards that just make the whole archetype faster and more consistent. And it really does feel like a blue Jesmon deck, a setup OTK deck in blue. And the reason why I didn't include things like Imperial Dramon or Hexablaumon is I don't think they fit in what the meta is trying to look like right now, where Ulforce Veedramon kind of does. Also, low-key, I saw a couple deck lists circling around the Facebook page, and I got really inspired, and I think it's a really cool deck, and I want to talk about it and put it in the rogue category, because it is pretty cool. So if you're a fan of Ulforce, give it a try. It might just be really good. Last deck to talk about, and if you don't know what this is my take on the security symbol from Digimon cards, and it's basically representative of security effects, and that means it's security control. Now, there are variants of security control. There's the classic yellow base that has all the crazy recovery / removal cards that we now have access to in set 6. There is, I think I've seen like a 3 Musketeer security control deck that plays like a Starmon engine on top of all that. And there's even funny things like Craniumon Blocker security control that plays like sticky stuff, and of course all the security effects. But the thing all these decks have in common is they're annoying, and they have tons of ways to counter everything. This is a deck that focuses not necessarily on winning, but on not losing, and thus winning, because if you're not losing, well, then you're winning. So, yeah, just by sheer power alone, sheer learning curve, sheer how frustrating it is for the average player, who cares what deck you're playing, average player, to play against a strategy like this, it is always tier 1 until it's not. Hopefully, this deck and how you can naturally play against it will become more mainstream as time goes on. And in fact, I think that's happening more and more every single day. We're seeing people prefer things like Jesmon and Bond of Friendship with Delicate Plans and 3 Musketeers versus this. But this deck, if it shows up, you're terrified. If it shows up, you gotta work 10 times as hard. And no matter what you do, they could have the counter to it. Their Sakuyamons, their Magnadramons, their infinite removal spells, they will have the counter for it. And unless you play a pure like anti-security control deck like Black Blockers or things that constantly recur themselves like D-Brigade, it's not a fun time. In fact, I would dare to say that this is the current, like in my opinion, like deck to beat, in the sense that if you don't have a strategy for this deck, you're in trouble. Where Jesmon you can beat just because Jesmon's like a normal deck, but this is not a normal deck. You need to know what you're doing, and a deck that demands the player base to become more skilled in order to beat it, I think is definitely deserving of a tier 1 spot, in my opinion, especially given how many people actually do play it. Alright guys, that wraps up my current BT6 meta tier list for the Digimon TCG. Those are all my thoughts and opinions on the currently played decks. There were some things that I left out like Shoutmon or Rookie Rush that I do think are useful and worth looking into and could be potential rogue candidates. But right now, these were the ones that immediately were in my memory when I was making this list. If you want to let me know your thoughts on this metagame, I'll leave a link down below to the tier maker template. Be sure to tweet me all your responses at @ChampionSteven_. I cannot wait to see your horrible takes. But with all that being said, I've been your true champion, Steven. Thank you so much for stopping by. Thank you to all my people during the live stream that may help me make this video, and to all of you for watching it. If you did enjoy and got any value from it, be sure to smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and click that bell for notifications so you know when my videos go live for you. But with all that being said, I've been your true champion, Steven. Please be sure to work hard, rest easy, and live well. And I will see you all next time. Peace.